So what are Schumann resonances? And I'll be honest and say I didn't know very much about them until quite recently when somebody asked a question about this. And I was like, she said, how does Schumann resonances affect your natal chart? And I'm like, well, I have never heard of those and I have no idea. So let me do this research and I will get back to you. And today is like part one of the research. I think there's a lot of other aspects that we're going to learn about with Schumann resonances, but we're beginning here. So to just talk about what they are, oops, that's not what I meant to do. So this is an image of an artistic image here. This is the Earth around the center. You can ignore the little triangle in the middle. This is because I'm using an image off of Wikipedia, and originally this was a video, which we're not playing here for bandwidth purposes. But the idea here is that we have the Earth in the center, and then this ring around the edge represents the ionosphere, which is sort of like a band of charged particles or a sphere of charged particles that surrounds the Earth. And in between the crust here and the ring, the ionosphere, we have the Earth's atmosphere, which is basically air mostly. So hydrogen and oxygen and, nitrogen.
I would say like probably half of it is air and the second half is not so much air, but yes, it's diminishing.
Air and air adjacent substances?
That's right.
Okay, all right. Anyway, the point is that this space between the Earth's curve and the ionosphere forms what is called a resonant cavity. And another example of a resonant cavity is like a trumpet or a bell. Right? The idea is that the shape of the cavity creates a potential for certain frequencies to resonate. Now, if those are audio frequencies, they produce sound, like in a trumpet or in a bell or in the inside of a guitar, for example. But these are electromagnetic frequencies, but they still resonate inside of this cavity. So Schumann resonances are the Earth's electromagnetic frequencies that resonate inside of the gap between the Earth's crust and the ionosphere. So it's almost like the Earth is like a giant bell and these frequencies are sort of ringing out inside, except they're not audio, they're electromagnetic. So,
but they have overtone qualities to them. So other than what our ears perceive, like a machine, a computer would look at the signal of one and look at the signal of the other and say, they look the same. So,
right.
Sound, radio, all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what are Schumann resonances? They are electromagnetic frequencies that resonate in the air gap between the Earth's crust and the ionosphere. The electromagnetic energy is caused by all kinds of things. So it could be lightning, it could be earthquakes, it could be solar energy ejections that make it into the Earth's environment. So it's kind of like if you have a musical instrument, then the sound might be caused by air going through the instrument. But in this case, it's caused by the energy of lightning and earthquakes and other things going on in the Earth's atmosphere. And they were basically theorized by this guy, Winifred Otto Schumann, hence Schumann resonances in 1952. Then since 1952, they've been scientifically established. There's actually a Russian space craft or space station that measures them. People debate what their effect on humans is. So some people say that they don't have any effect on humans and we don't really sense them. But other people say no, that they can be correlated with mood, like good Schumann resonances help you feel more relaxed. But if they're more agitated, you might feel more annoyed. There's some evidence that people have like lower blood pressure when they're more, the Schumann resonances are more positive. And this isn't actually about any of those because I feel like I'm still working on how they affect us. This is really about how it interacts with our natal chart. And so in order to answer that, we have to get more specific about what they actually are. So this is actually a model of some of the Schumann resonances themselves. So the basic mode is at 7.83 hertz, and it's this red sort of vertical ring. And if you're an astrologer, this looks a lot like an opposition, which is sort of interesting about this, that it has this sort of geometric view that astrologers think about. Then there's a second order, which is sort of like another resonant frequency, and that's at 14.1 hertz. And there's a third order, which is 20.3 hertz. So the 14.1 is sort of this triangular thing here. And then the third order of 20 is more of a circular. And there's actually a fourth order too, and I think even a fifth, but I couldn't find a diagram of that. And I'll just note that both of these images are from Wikipedia, so giving credit where credit is due. So the modes are like 7.83 hertz, 14.1 hertz, 20.3 hertz. And of course, as an astrologer, when you see numbers like this, you instantly start thinking about degrees. So when we're asking how does it affect the planets in our natal chart, well, the answer is that it affects the planets based on their degrees. So planets that have degrees that are close to these numbers start to become affected by these, and I'll explain why in just a second. So there are two things I have to say. One of them is that this is sort of like the basic resonating frequency, but because it's dependent on the gap between the crust and the ionosphere, it actually fluctuates a little bit depending on the day. So sometimes the ionosphere is higher, sometimes it's lower, there are seasonal changes or daily changes. So this is sort of like a range. It's not just these exact numbers that are important.
We have a question here about connecting this to sacred geometry.
Yes, so that's a really good question, and that's something that I am still working on, but I believe that it does connect to sacred geometry. There's some symbols that you find in cultures all over the globe, and like an equilateral triangle is one of them, or a circle or a square. And I think that there's something deeply innate in us that recognizes that these sorts of shapes are natural to our existence on Earth. And actually, this relates to what we're talking about today and how the planets the Schumann resonances affect your natal chart, which is that they boost our communication. And so my theory on this is that, we're all raised on this planet. We're all sensitive to these types of energies. And they are energies then that resonate with our fellow human beings. It's almost like everybody grows up drinking water, or everybody grows up enjoying the sunshine, or everybody grows up smiling at each other. And so it's sort of like a natural aspect of communication. And I was a little bit skeptical about this when I first had this idea, but my spirit guides really encouraged me to just experiment and see if it would work out. And it's sort of worked out like more than I had imagined. So yes, I think this is definitely related to sacred geometry. And it's certainly related to the sacred geometry of your astrological chart. Okay, so the question is then, if this boosts our communication and our ability to resonate with other humans, how do we break that down? How can we tell how that's at work in our charts? Okay, so I have these. So you can see the first fundamental mode is 7.83. So I've turned that into a range of like 6 to 9 degrees, right? And then the second is 14. So I'm saying that's like 12 to 16. The third is 20.3, and I'm saying that's 18 to 22. So I hope you guys can see it's sort of like plus or minus a little bit. And what I find is that the planets that are at the edge of the degree range, sometimes they're good for communication, but other times they're not so much. So the closer you are to those basic numbers, the more dialed in your planet is for communication. So I'm going to go through what these mean, and then we're going to look at an example, which I think will help you understand how this actually applies to humans.
I think another thing that can help maybe visualize this is, so everybody's gone to live music performances, more or less. And when somebody gets too close to the microphone with their guitar on, you get this feedback. And if you walk away from it, the feedback stops.
Yeah.
So I think maybe we could think of that a little bit as you move into this, you get feedback, you move out of it, you lose the feedback.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's a way that we can kind of visualize this.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you, honey. Okay. So what we're finding from our analysis and looking at these examples is that when you have planets that are like 6 to 9 degrees, those tend to really resonate with other people. So if you communicate based on that planetary energy, that's the one that really catches people's emotions and helps people feel like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. That makes sense to me at a basic level. Now, the second level, so planets from 12 to 16, if you communicate based on these planets, you end up with messages that sort of naturally flow. They're attractive to people. They're easy to absorb. People learn from your example. They sort of watch you do things and pick up things. And if you notice, the second order is the triangle. This gets back to that sacred energy. The second order is the triangle, and the equilateral triangle in astrology is the angle of flow, right? It's 120-degree angles. So it's an angle of harmony and things that work together easily. Now the third order, so this is planets from 18 to 22 degrees. This type of messaging tends to come across to people as sort of like a common sense, like, yeah, I get why you'd say that. It's maybe a new teaching, maybe something they hadn't thought of before, but it appears true and reasonable, and people are willing to put some effort in to learn or understand. So maybe it's not as flowing or as easy as the second order planets, but it like resonates with people and they get it and they're willing to work to understand what you're talking about. Today's lecture would be an example of a third order type communication where you guys are like, well, I guess I can get it and I got to think about it and we'll look at some examples, but I feel like this could work. Fingers crossed, those of you who are watching feel this way. Now, the fourth order is interesting because this type of energy typically manifests as something that is intriguing or interesting to others, but they can't replicate what you do. So it's not like you're teaching them or they resonate or they learn by example. It's more like, wow, you're amazing at that. Okay, I'd like to watch more. I'd like to learn more about this, but people don't look at it and think that they necessarily could actually do what you were doing.
This could be like somebody watching the Final Four basketball game tonight. Lots of people are very intrigued, but very few people actually believe that they could play basketball at that level.
Yeah, exactly, right. So
especially as they get older,
It's sort of like the expertise, that we love to watch, but we're not necessarily thinking we can do it. So the reason this is important is that if you're looking to figure out your healing communication, understanding how you can communicate using your different planets will help you recognize, like, what is the energy used if you're trying to teach something? What is the energy you should use if you want people to just resonate with your point? What is the energy you should use if you want people to be interested, but you're not necessarily expecting them to pick up how you did this? And I'll just say that this has really been very healing for me to understand this. And we're about to look at my chart, so you'll see. Okay. Feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. I'll just pause for some water if there's something you want to ask me, or if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question. Okay. All right, so we've got these four different types of communication, and now we're going to look at my chart and talk about a personal example of how this might work. Okay, so I've just recreated these keywords up here, and then here's my chart. This is my natal chart. So the first thing that I do when I'm doing an analysis like this is I just try to figure out which planets fall into which of these ranges. And by the way, I'll mention that I have a worksheet that I created for you, and it's available on my Patreon, or it will go out with the replay, the link to the replay here, so that you can download the worksheet or print it out, and it has boxes to fill all of this in if you want to do this on your own chart. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look for is planets that are in the range of 6 to 9 degrees, and I have 4 of those. Now, I'll mention that I added some extra asteroids here. So I've got my moon at the top of the chart. I've got Venus down at the bottom of the chart. I've got my lot of fortune. That's what LOF stands for there, lot of fortune. And then I've got my Ceres over here. Ceres is this thing that looks like a sickle. And it basically is an asteroid that has to do with your connection with nature. So if I were giving advice to myself about how to communicate in a way that would really catch people's attention, or people would be automatically sort of like vibe with me, I would say, well, you should be using your lunar energies. You should be communicating about emotion. You should use your Venus energies. You should be communicating about art or relationships. You should use your lot of fortune here. My lot of fortune's in Cancer. So that's like nurturing and healing. And you should be discussing nature. So my asteroid here, Ceres, is the connection with nature. And so you might notice that actually the intro for this, which had all of this walk in nature and the art in the cathedral, and I talked about how much fun we're having, is really me sort of diving into all of these things. I will say that I've been testing this out on my social media, and I am getting better social media results when I dive into these energies a little bit more. Okay, so these are my resonant planets, asteroids, placements. If I want to really attract people's attention and get them on my wavelength, I should be talking about these things. All right, then we can go to the next range, right? That's 12 to 16. And I've got two. One is my Chiron, and then here's my Vesta, which is another asteroid about your like passion or what keeps your inner flame burning. So these are things that I could talk about if I wanted people to learn from my example, or if I wanted something that was attractive and easy to absorb. So I'll say this is really true. Chiron is your childhood pain. And when I talk about my difficulties from my childhood, people are pretty like, yeah, I get that. That is really hard. I can see how that is difficult for you. And then my Vesta are just things that I'm passionate about. Are you saying something, honey?
Disagreeing.
Disagreeing. Okay, right. Okay. So those would be good ways to sort of learn from example. If I was going to do like a live demonstration, that would be great things to dive into. Now, then I have a lot of the teaching order planets.
Yeah, everyone notes, even before we knew about astrology, even before we knew about Schumann planets or, these orders or anything, everyone, going back 30 years, Robin teaches. That's what she does.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what it is, because it could be math, it could be English, it could be gardening, it could be astrology, it could be history. She gave tours at the Met when she was in college, and the American Wing at the New York, the Metropolitan, right?
Metropolitan Museum of Art.
Right. So, doesn't matter. She'll learn it and then she'll teach it.
Yeah, it's true. I went back and I found my high school yearbook recently. So that's like 35 years ago at this point. And there were people in my high school yearbook who were like, thank you for teaching me this. Thank you for teaching math. I never would have passed algebra without you. So
well, and because you had access to your mom, you even taught things that some of the AP teachers didn't even know.
Yeah, I had an AP physics teacher who didn't know anything about, well, he was not an expert in physics, and my mother's a physicist. So when he had a question, like a student had a question he couldn't answer, then the student would he would ask me to go home and ask my mom, and I would have to come back the next day and explain the answer to the class. So I was teaching a little AP physics.
The path was set at an early age.
Right. So so I have 3 planets here, my Saturn at the bottom, my Mars over here, and my Mercury over here, plus 2 angles in my chart. So my ascendant and my descendant are all in this teaching range. And the funny thing is that most of my teaching in my life has been done one-on-one, which is over here in the 7th house. That's the house of one-on-one interactions. So looking at this, it was kind of not a surprise that I have a lot of teaching energy, but it was sort of cool to see that the teaching energy isn't so much for like teaching art, right? Because my Venus, which is the art planet, is not really in the teaching range. So it explains why I've ended up teaching a lot of technical subjects like math and astrology and science and grammar and things like that. So that was sort of interesting to me. And then we have the intrigue range. Now, this is my Jupiter up here is the one that looks like a 4, plus my MC and my IC. So this was really helpful for me because as much as I've been very successful as a teacher of sort of technical subjects like astrology or math or science, I've always really struggled to teach my spiritual connection. I can explain it to people and people want to hear about it, but I can't really get people like on the same level that I am at. And that was something I felt very guilty about because for a long time I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to like help people with their spiritual connection. And seeing that my spiritual connection planet is in this intriguing but can't be replicated range was sort of like a relief. Because I kind of thought I was sort of screwing it up. Like I should be able to teach this, but I can't, and I don't know what's wrong, and I'm such a good teacher. And I used to say I could teach anything that I could do, and then I'm like, but this isn't true because I can't really teach my spiritual connection. And so I feel like this has been very healing for me in several ways, but this is one of them. Is it's sort of like, here are the things that you can concentrate on teaching, right? These pink things. But then there are some other things that you can't teach, and people will be interested and they'll want to know about it, but you're not responsible for like breaking that down or helping other people get to where you are. which we're going to talk more about when we get to
Right,
Steve's chart.
because in this particular case, Robin's astrology, on some level, the way she does astrology falls into this. I recognize that because the way Robin does astrology is amazing. I'm never going to do astrology like that. That's not my gift. That's her gift. That's not my gift. But it's intriguing.
Yeah.
But hard to replicate.
Okay, fair enough. So we've been talking about an overall pattern, right? You can see that I have a lot of teaching energy, but then there's some planets that I can't really replicate. But you can also do this analysis by diving into a single planet or placement. And I wanted to talk about my lot of fortune here. That's the one that looks like a target. And your lot of fortune is sort of like your sweet spot or your success zone or the thing that you're very good at that you will receive, you'll receive praise or success or payment for doing. And so one of the things that is really hard for me is that I got a lot of discouragement when I was little for being this sort of Cancer energy. This is this astrology sign of Cancer down here. And I got a lot of discouragement for being like too emotional or too caring or too kind or
too trusting.
Yeah, too trusting, right. And it may sound a little odd to be like, well, I was criticized as a child for being too caring and too kind, but I grew up in a sort of highly intellectual, competitive environment. And so caring and kindness were not necessarily like seen as the strongest attributes.
Not going to get you ahead.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I have spent the last couple of days really struggling with trying to communicate in a way that is more healing and more emotional and more kind and more caring, because there's this part of me that's like, no, you should be technical. You should be teaching practical content. You should be teaching how-to content. So when we say that this analysis can be healing, one of the ways is that it's healing is that it can help you really own aspects of your communication that maybe you're not so sure about, or you've never known what to do with them, or you felt bad about them, or it help you feel better about things like, why am I always so far out ahead of everybody else in these areas? So really it's that aspect of astrology that reveals who you are to you. And then you're able to sort of adapt that or adopt that or accept that or stop blaming yourself for being different in some other way. All right, I'm interested in what you guys think of this. If anybody wants to put a question or a comment in the chat, we're going to go on to our celebrity examples. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your comment. Love that. Good. I'm glad you're following along here. Yeah, it really, I mean, Steve can tell you, like, this has sort of blown my mind in the last couple of days, and I've had a lot of tears over it, but I realize there's a part of me that's so uncomfortable with this emotional communication, and I'm really trying to get better at it. So thank you to everybody who's listening to this and receiving my attempt at healing and emotional and honest communication. Yeah, it's very true. We can spend a lifetime beating ourselves up, right? Okay. All right. So let's do a couple of celebrity examples. These were examples suggested by my spirit guides. And it's interesting to compare these two people. I just thought you might like some examples that aren't Steve or me. I was a little bit concerned because I normally don't like to do two male examples, but my spirit guides suggested these. And then I discovered that they're actually both born on the same day, December 10th.
We picked celebrity chefs because that's what we watch on TV.
Yeah. Right.
Just disclosure. We watch all the cooking
right.
competition shows.
We write the lecture, so we get a chance to pick the examples. Okay.
I watch things that she doesn't watch. She watches things that I don't watch. But we both watch this, so it's a big part of our lives.
Right, there we go. That's what we do every night for dinner. Okay. So we've got two celebrity chefs. They're both born on December 10th. I'll explain why that's important. And we're going to go through their Schumann planet analysis. And so I've just basically sort of created a small little list at the bottom to remind us of what the different planets are. Okay, so the interesting thing is that the celebrity chef on the right has 4 planets in the, thank you, honey, left. 4 planets in the,
yeah, it's on the screens.
No, you're totally, there's no excuse. It's obviously the left.
Military left, as they would say.
Thank you, honey.
In the military.
All right, so he has 4 planets, and actually I think there's 5. I think I missed the Jupiter right here, which is in this range. There's 5 planets in the resonate zone. And the celebrity chef on the right, this right over here, has no planets in the resonate zone. Now, both of these are actually very famous and very well known. And if you're a Food Network person, you'll recognize them once we finally show who they are. But the funny thing is we started looking at these two, like the guy on the left, when he comes on, you just love him. He's got a great personality. He's super engaging and
positive, always positive.
Yeah, really interesting. And the guy on the right is basically known for being an amazing cook, but he doesn't resonate, at least with us as viewers, at a basic level.
He's not, yeah, he doesn't, he's not come on in and to my house and hang out and we're going to have fun. It's more like, I'm going to make this thing and it's going to be amazing. And the guy on the left, I mean, you know, it doesn't even matter sometimes. Like when he's on these shows and judging, like, can he do what he's judging? Can he cook as well as the people he's judging? You don't really care.
Right. Because he's just such a great guy. He just like, you just vibe with him. Yeah. Now, so the guy on the right, actually, though, has a ton of planets in the purple zone. So that's the zone of flow, of people learning by example, of people looking at what you do and saying, oh, yeah, I really like that. And the interesting thing is that the chef on the right is known for actually demonstrating his cooking. So, and we've watched many shows where he actually cooks a lot, and we can always pick up things by watching his example. And now we have some techniques that we use as cooks from watching him. The guy on the left doesn't actually cook that much. Like he's more of a mentor or a host, or he's a guest, or he's critiquing things, but he doesn't actually do the cooking.
You don't see him cook very often.
Yeah. I mean, when my spirit guide suggested these examples, I'm like, what are we going to figure out from two celebrity chefs? But then we started analyzing the planet and we really realized that they're quite different in terms of how they show up on these shows. So the guy on the left is somebody you totally vibe with and he's really great, but he doesn't actually cook that much. The guy on the right doesn't have the most amazing personality, but he's a tremendous cook and you just learn a lot from watching him. Now, where they both overlap is they both have a bunch of pink planets in the teaching zone. They both are critiquing things, making comments. This is a good level of spices. That's too spicy. You know, poaching is a good way to cook halibut, or it's not a good way to cook halibut. So both of them are very good at sort of critiquing and giving out instruction for the home cook. And then there's a big difference, though, here in terms of the planets in the red zone. Now, it doesn't look like that big a difference because the guy on the right has two arrows and the guy on the left only has one. But these two arrows are the moon and Saturn. So those are two really major planets. And then the guy on the left only has one red arrow, and it's this little thing that looks like a square with a cross on it. And that is the asteroid Vesta, which it's not Vesta, it's the asteroid Pallas, and it has to do with teamwork. So the guy on the right, his intrigue, right? That's the level where people are intrigued by what you do, but they can't replicate it. This guy is a tremendous cook. He's just an incredible cook and he wins almost all of his competitions. And you look at him and you don't think to yourself, oh, I could learn to cook the way that this guy does.
Also, if you look at where his palace is, there's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's like everybody else's palace.
Right. And so the funny thing about this is that the way they show up, remember, palace is like teamwork or being in the fight with people. The guy on the right is almost never a team player. He doesn't show up on cooking shows where there's a team of people, or if he is, he's like the mentor, but he's not one of the cooks in the group. And then the guy on the left actually is famous for his teamwork. And he almost always is like, if he's a judge, he's on a panel of judging, or if he's a host, then he's with another host. He's almost always working together. So the point is that it's not that the guy on the right here doesn't work with people, but he's not famous for it because it's not in his communication sweet spot. Whereas this other guy on the left, because the palace is in one of the Schumann bands, it's something that he's known for, and it's something that communicates well to an audience. So that's part of what's cool about this analysis is it allows you to go through your planets and figure out which one of them other people will vibe with, and if so, how, and which of them are just like you doing your own thing on your own. This is for me to figure stuff out, but I don't really have to like explain this to people or expect anybody else to understand. And that's another way that I think this is very healing, is that sometimes we can feel bad that we can't explain how we do things, or we like some weird thing and we don't know anybody else who likes it, but we just do it ourselves. And this really shows you that that's how we're designed. Like, we're designed to have some energies that communicate well with others and other energies that are like just for us, just, for us to figure things out. Okay, so if we're looking at this, the guy on the left is, as I say, he's known for his teamwork. He's on a judging panel. He's a host with partner, and he's also a former professional football player. So of course he was like very famous for working with the team. And the guy on the right almost always is like a solo host, or he's a one-on-one competitor, or he's a mentor, but he's not really in the fight with people very often. Anything you want to add or say about this, honey?
No, I think the charts speak for themselves.
All right.
It really does a remarkable job of summarizing their strengths.
Yeah. And so the nice thing about this is one of these things where if you were counseling these people, you would say, hey, don't worry that you're not the guy that everybody wants to watch cook, right? To the guy on the left or the guy on the right. Don't feel bad that people don't vibe with your personality, because everybody has these other strengths that you can dive into. So it really helps you see like that we can all, feel good about being who we are. Okay. So we'll reveal who these people are. Person on the left is Eddie Jackson, former professional football player, really amazing guy, great personality. We watch any show that he's on, not known for his actual cooking as much. And the guy on the right is Bobby Flay, who's one of the all-time winningest competition cooks ever. And we spend a lot of time watching him. And honestly, I didn't decide that I really liked his personality until about 15 shows in. And then he sort of grew on me. And now I see that actually he's a really cool guy.
And he's built this cooking empire too.
Yeah.
That's worth, upwards of 60 million. I mean, he's and like, actually he has one daughter, and he's been married a couple times, but he's not currently married. And his daughter came on one of his episodes recently, commented about how in the green room, his green room is full of pictures of all of his cats.
Right.
But there wasn't any picture of his daughter. And she's like, I'm giving you this picture to put in there because you should have a picture of me in the green room.
Right. Yeah, he's just not known for being the most emotional guy. So as befitting people who are famous, both of these men have a lot of placements in their Schumann degrees, 10 out of 14. And both of them have Venus, which is the planet of food, and Mars, which is the planet of sort of physical activity in these Schumann zones. Eddie Jackson on the left is famous for being a pro football player in addition to a chef. But Bobby Flay, if you watch his show, Beat Bobby Flay, he actually is very physical, and he runs around a lot and he throws things and he does like salsa dancing. So he has a lot of physical energy as a performer, even though he isn't famous for being an athlete. But I think he was athletic actually in high school. He was on like the high school baseball team or something like that. Anyway, so I hope you're sort of getting the hang of how you can use this type of analysis to understand people's communication, to understand the difference between people, and to recognize your own sweet spot for diving in. This is Steve and me. We did me on the left, but I wanted to point out a little subtlety here. So you're familiar, I had my moon with my Schumann resonance. And Steve's moon is also at 8 degrees. And so his is also a Schumann planet as well. But there's a sort of subtle difference. Now, if you're like, I get the analysis so far and I've had all I want to have in it, then you can just ignore what I'm about to say. But if you're one of those people who's like, more is more, and I get this, but I'd like to understand some more technical details, I'll just point this out here, which is that you can see that I gave Steve's arrow like a much brighter green outline, and mine has kind of a flat outline. So both of us have our moons at 8, which is a Schumann planet. But his moon is in Taurus, which is a really good sign for the moon, and that means it's exalted. And my moon is in Capricorn, which is one of the worst signs for the moon, and that means it's in detriment. So both of us have the ability to communicate about lunar themes like emotions or the body or your longings and desires. Food, right? But Steve is going to be way better at it because his moon is in a great sign. And I've really struggled with this because my moon is not in such a good sign. So planetary strength or planetary dignity, it's called, or in my case, it's stability because my moon is weak, will play into how effective this type of communication is. Now, I'm really trying to get my emotional communication online, and I'm doing a lot of moon work, and I'm wearing my lunar necklace here, and I do, moon stuff to try to become more emotional. But you can actually apply all the astrological analysis to these planets too. So like their house and the sign that they're in and the aspects that they get. And the worksheet does actually mention some of those things.
I also, by the way, have some lunar jewelry. I'm not really wearing most of it right now, but I am wearing this one piece here, which is this cool Viking themed round thing. And it used to be silver, but like anything that touches me for too long, it's going to get tarnished. So I've tarnished it up.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so Steve and I both have a couple planets on the flow zone. And, but this is where we really diverge. So I have way more pink than Steve does. Steve does not have many pink planets. And that means that teaching is not such a natural thing for him. The one that he does have really over here is his Pluto in Virgo. But he's not as natural of a teacher as I am, which is why I tend to take the lead on things like this. But what Steve does have is a ton of planets in the intrigue zone. And this is interesting because Steve is actually a professional writer. I don't know if you know that. And he's a brilliant writer. But I'm the one who's better as a writing teacher.
Because I can't tell you what it is I do and how it works.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's not only intriguing to others, it's intriguing to me.
Right? So we had his tutoring business for, 20 years. And Steve taught, grammar, he taught reading comprehension, but he never really could teach people how to write. So it's been funny to compare the two of us and realize I'm the one with all the teaching vibes. And Steve is the one with the interesting, but like people can't necessarily replicate what he does there. I also have all 4 of my angles. So the angles in the chart are AC, IC, DC, and the MC. All 4 of my angles are in Schumann Resonances, and Steve doesn't have any of his angles there. So this has been another really healing thing for me because I got some messages as a kid that I should be hiding. I shouldn't be going public. I shouldn't be telling people what was going on with me. People would think I was crazy. And that was very devastating to me as a child, and it means that my communication is always sort of hard for me now. Somebody who has all 4 angles in their Schumann resonances probably can't avoid communicating. Like I probably could not live a quiet life where I didn't teach or I didn't communicate or I didn't express myself. So this is something that might help you if you've either received a lot of messages that you should communicate, but you don't want to, or vice versa, that you shouldn't communicate, but you feel like you can't help yourself. This helps you understand like how many placements do you have in the Schumann degrees? And are they the major parts of your chart? And if so, that will help you understand what your natural communication is like. Okay. All right. Any questions in the chat people want to ask? Oh, sorry about that. This was a slightly nicer slide earlier. It seems to have gotten a little out of whack. Anyway, so we're just recapping this, right? If your planets are in 6 to 9 degrees, that's the resonate zone. When you communicate, people instinctively listen and resonate with who you are. This has to do with sort of likability, people that you innately resonate with, even if you're not sure why, but you just like them. If planets are 12 to 16, that's the flow zone. People find these energies and themes harmonious and easily understand or agree with your point of view. Also learn by example. 18 to 22, the teach zone. It might be challenging because they don't understand it, but they're willing to learn, willing to listen to you, willing to invest some energy. And then the intrigue zone, people don't necessarily get it or they can't do it, but they like to watch you. So if people are super successful at some level, like professional athletes or amazing artists, great writers, you might find that they have more placements in this sort of zone. And then you can also consider the sign of the planet, the house, the strength or weakness. If there are aspects from Venus or Jupiter that boost the communication, if there are aspects from Mars or Saturn, that makes it harder. Sometimes people may not agree with you, or they may feel sort of like defensive, or like in my case, trying to limit what I said. So the nice thing about this is that you sort of can analyze it at any level. Like if all you do is just discover that you have a whole bunch of resonate planets and not very many teach planets, that right there would already be helpful. But you can dive into your communication with individual planet analysis, depending on, how much you want to get into it. So to help you with this, I made this worksheet. This worksheet's going to be available on the Patreon, and it will also go out as a link to anybody who's signed up for our email list at spiritsaid.com. And I plan to turn this into an article also with more information about how I've gone through the healing process from understanding this and how it's helped me understand my own communication. And then I'll just put in a little plug on our YouTube channel on Sunday, April 13th. Steve and I are having a live discussion debate about soulful versus practical astrology. Of course, all astrology is soulful and practical. But splitting it up has been kind of cool. We've thought of different ways in which it's either soulful or it's practical. Is it helpful? Is it higher octave? Is it healing? Is it problem solving? And that's been really interesting.
And we're taking the sides that aren't the sides that, looking at our charts, you'd think we would.
Yeah, that's cool, right?
Robin is talking about the soulful, even though she's got a lot of strong Virgo placement. And as she was saying earlier, right, has had the challenge of her childhood pain of you can't express emotional things, you have to express intellectual things. Mm-hmm. And for me, I was kind of really more the opposite. And I wasn't encouraged so much to think intellectually about my life and value that so much as I was like, be a good, kind person. And I have three planets and an asteroid in my first house, which is my sun, my ascendant, Mercury, and Vesta.
Yeah.
In my first house. So, which is Cancer. So that's a lot of Cancer. And my mother has a lot of Cancer. And I was raised by my mom for many years as single parent. So it's like Robin and I have two different life tracks. Robin was on the intellectual life track. I was on the deep feeling track. But here we are on this discussion. I'm going to talk about the practical. She's going to talk about the soulful.
Yeah, we're switching life tracks. Which is cool. I appreciate having my husband as a partner, to be able to do that. And I'll just mention our next lecture is on Saturday, April 19th, but it is going to be pre-recorded because we are traveling with family that weekend. So we'll just be sending out the link to everybody. So I want to thank everybody who is here, everybody who has shared with their friends about this Patreon and our email list at spiritsaid.com. Everybody who asks questions, gives us feedback, encourages us. And to just say thank you. I know this isn't always easy. It's not, like an easy analysis where there's like, oh, you have Venus in Leo, and that's what this means. And I just want to encourage you that it's worth it. And I know it can be overwhelming. Don't feel like you have to understand everything, but anything you do get out of this, if you take this worksheet, you run your planets through it, you will be rewarded with helpful insight. And so thank you for being willing to work on something intellectually challenging and leveling up our insight.